Welcome. The year is 985, and Eric the Victorious has just been victorious. Where? Here, at Fusfeller, around the old Swedish capital of Uppsala. This is where a history of Sweden itself as a country can begin. There have been kings before this, of course, but due to them falling victim to either contradicting sources or only having one source to begin with, they are difficult to talk about definitively. Eric is therefore considered the first historically accurate king of Sweden, thought to have ruled over these lands, with these possible areas being in some sort of subservient position to him. Following his father's example, we get Olof Skötkonung, the first Christian king of Sweden. He probably wasn't the first, but he is the first in our historically accepted list. He's also the first one to have his rulership over the Geats here in the east confirmed, meaning this map cannot be considered accurate. So one could say it was kind of a big deal, taking his father's trait of being historically documented and then confirming many uncertainties up until now, like religion and areas under his crown. He also allied with the Danish, and together they beat the Norwegians in the Battle of Svolder, gaining him these territories. After him came Onund Jakob, who continued his father's ambitions of Christianizing the realm and fought the Danish. Then there was Emund the Old, who got his son killed in Finland, watched the church split in two and shrugged, after which he promptly called his reign a job well done and died just 10 years after ascending to the throne. This would promptly be beaten by King Stenskjöld, who ascended to the throne, made some prayers, fought the Norwegians, and then promptly died after 6 years on the throne. These exponentially short reigns would become somewhat of a trend. It turns out that having so many kings in short succession in a newborn kingdom with religious conflicts really isn't a good idea. Following the death of Stenskjöld, two pretenders known only as Eric and Eric would rise somewhere in Sweden. They would promptly raise armies, devastate the land, cause chaos and destruction, kill each other, and then leave Sweden in a weak and vulnerable state, achieving literally nothing. The stroll accuracy of their claims are also disputed, leaving them as literal ghosts left to confuse Swedish historians for almost 1,000 years. This would lead into some very confusing times, with a lot of historically disputed kings and regencies, with the rulers coming, going and coming back here and there as allegiances change. Try to follow. At the death of the Eriks, Halsten would be elected to the throne around 1067. He reigned for 3 years, during a time of immense religious turmoil, described as being so bad that the bishops didn't dare travel to Sweden, possibly out of fear of being killed by pagans. He was then deposed around 1070, when supposedly Onund from Russia would be elected king. He reigned for a few years, before refusing to indulge in the pagan sacrifices at the Temple of Uppsala, a place where believers in the Norse religions would sacrifice animals and sometimes people to the gods. He was then deposed, and Håkan the Red would ascend the throne, though some sources describe him as the direct successor of Halsten. He would have a mysterious reign, and was deposed around 1080 when Inge, a son of Stenskjöld, would take the throne. Some sources also mention Inge being the same person as Onund from Russia. In addition to that, there's also sources who mention two kings, depicting a co-rule where Inge ruled together with Halsten or Håkan the Red. Confusing yet? Inge, or possibly Inge together with Håkan, or most likely Halsten, were deposed in favor of Blot Sven yet again after the king, Inge, refused to administer the blot at Uppsala, which infuriated the pagans who voted him out in favor of Sven. The blot part in Blot Sven is due to him being a pagan, who promptly administered the religious ceremonies at Uppsala. This supposedly angered the faithfully Christian, previous King Inge, who soon after killed Sven. Not only that, but there's a historian who supports the theory that Sven and Håkan were also the same person, making these totally not confusing times totally less confusing. After that, there's the mythical king Erik Årsel, who by most accounts is not considered legitimate or to have even existed, but was supposedly a pagan king who followed in Sven's footsteps. The more historically supported following king to Sven is, once again, the man, the myth, the legend, Inge, supposedly also with Philip, who would rule together with both him and possibly yet another disputed king, Inge, this time the younger. This is quite typical for the Swedish monarchy at the time, and to avoid wasting your time, I won't be going through every king this way, because trust me, I could sit here for hours just trying to tell you who possibly ruled Sweden at times. Generally, the following decades went something like this. Swedish kings Christianized Sweden and pacified the pagan religion. They often fought the Danish and Norwegians, which sometimes led to unions such as the Swedish-Norwegian Union under Magnus IV, 1319 to 1355, and Håkan Magnusson, 1343 to 1380. I know I just skipped a couple decades, but in general not much happened in Sweden during the medieval ages. The country generally moved from paganism to Christianity, and grew slightly into northern Sweden and Finland every few years. There was also of course immense confusion, that is, the Swedish elective monarchy, between the Viking Age and the Kalmar Union. Talking about the Kalmar Union, after King Håkan was deposed, Albert of Mecklenburg was taken in as king. He actually reigned for more than 2 seconds, ending the streak of very confusing kings from the earlier decades, staying on the throne for a whole 25 years. He then lost a battle to the Danish queen, who promptly took the crown of Sweden, formalizing the union of the Scandinavian monarchies at Kalmar in Sweden. This union, known as the Kalmar Union, would last for the coming decades, but the Swedes wouldn't be so easily conquered, and it did eventually end. Ahead of us lies the reign of the Danish monarchs in the Kalmar Union, the woes of the Swedish nobility, and at the end of it all, at the hands of the revolution led by Vasa.